Friends, as I said, today we celebrate the feast day of Saints Timothy and Titus. Yesterday we celebrated the feast of the apostle to the Gentiles, his conversion, St. Paul. And today we honor two of the first fruits of his own ministry, his own conversion, these two men, Saints Timothy and Titus. So first of all, who were these guys? They were disciples. They were students of Paul, right? In the New Testament, we have letters that Paul wrote to both Timothy and Titus, and we just have Paul's side of the correspondence. I always wish, that's one of those things that I can't wait to read in heaven, the opposite side of the correspondence. I'd love to read what the church in Corinth was writing to Paul that elicited his responses, or I'd love to read what Timothy and Titus wrote to Paul that elicited his responses, to have these letters that we have. So they were traveling companions of his, and early on in Paul's ministry, in his life, they heard Paul preaching, they heard him teaching, and they were taken up into it. They were inspired by it, and they wanted to follow him and learn from him. And eventually, Paul, having formed them, he sent them out to kind of shepherd the communities, some of the communities that he had established. So they were apostles of the apostle, right? That's kind of how this works. They were the ones who were sent by the one who was sent. That's who they were. But this is what kind of grabbed my attention as I was praying through these readings today. Not just today, yesterday, a few days before. Okay. I wasn't just cramming this morning. Okay. Before they were inspired by Paul and formed by him and sent out by him, before they were in correspondence with him, recipients of letters that would make it into the New Testament, inspiring billions of people for 2 millennia, before they were that, before they were saints, Timothy and Titus, who were they? They were two boys. They were just boys. They were just two boys who grew up in families. They were sons. They were grandsons. And Paul makes mention of that, actually, in the first reading we have today for Mass. It just so happens to come from his second letter that he wrote to Timothy. What does Paul say? This is what we heard. I yearn to see you again, recalling your tears so that I may be filled with joy as I recall your sincere faith that first lived in your grandmother, Lois, and in your mother, Eunice, and that I am confident lives also in you. I get that today is the feast day of Saints Timothy and Titus, but they would never have been Saints Timothy and Titus if it weren't for Lois and Eunice. They wouldn't have been Saints Timothy and Titus if it weren't for Lois and Eunice. So I want to talk about Lois and Eunice, the unsung heroines of today's feast day. And I don't think Timothy and Titus, I don't think they would mind. I just was thinking about the Loises and the Eunices that have existed in the life of the church for centuries. The daily mass crowd, every parish, this parish, every parish is filled with Loises and Eunices. Faithful women who are moms and grandmothers whose hearts are filled with faith and love of Jesus Christ and the church and want their sons, their daughters, their grandsons, their granddaughters to have the faith too. Is that not true? I think it's very true. And I just notice how Paul first mentions that the faith was first alive in Lois and Eunice before it came alive in Timothy's heart, and we can say by extension Titus's heart. They laid the groundwork that he built upon, that their faith was the foundation stone that Paul's preaching. Their faith was like the scaffolding that he was able to hang things on. Whatever metaphor you need, that's the truth, that they laid the foundation that he built upon. In other words, they were not incidental players in their story. They weren't incidental players in their grandsons' conversions. That's the point. They mattered. I often think there's a lot of us, a lot of the Loises and Eunices, and the spouses of the Loises and Eunices who can sometimes get into this hopeless posture, this place of thinking, does my faith even matter? Is it making any difference to anybody? Especially to the people that I love the most, to my children, to my grandchildren. And if the scriptures are true, then that means they're true for everyone in all times. And it's clear that the faith of Lois and Eunice mattered. It matters. It matters how you live your faith. It matters. No matter how many times you feel rebuffed or rebuked by your own children or grandchildren, your children maybe or your grandchildren who have walked away from the faith, your faith matters still. It matters. I know many of you carry this cross because you've shared it with me in different contexts, but how hard it is to carry that ache, to carry that longing for your children, your grandchildren to either come back to the church or to have the faith that was once alive there be reignited because it's grown dim and secularized and zapped out of them. Like these women, Lois and Eunice, these are your sisters. These are your great intercessors. They know this hardship, right? We have no idea how long Lois and Eunice prayed for Timothy. We have no idea. We have no idea how, like if he thought that his mom, if he thought that his grandma were annoying with all their talk about Jesus and this Christianity thing. We have no idea. But I'm sure that they prayed that someone would come into their boys' lives and make all the difference. So, on the feast of St. Timothy and Titus, I'm talking to Lois and Eunice. Your faith matters. Your quiet witness, it matters. Your intercession matters more than you could know. And if you doubt that, just ask Timothy and Titus. And they'll tell you, it really mattered. Amen.